Sarah Martinez didn't earn the title of the city's first female chief of police by shying away from adversity. No. Her 15 years on the force had ingrained in her a simple but profound truth. Sometimes, the toughest battles weren't waged on crime-ridden streets, but in the deceptively peaceful corners of suburban neighborhoods, where authority could fester unchecked and unchallenged. Losing her husband, Detective James Martinez, in the line of duty 5 years ago had been the single greatest tragedy of her life. But rather than let grief consume her, she had poured herself into her work, honoring James's memory while maintaining their cherished home in Oakwood Heights, a modest ranch-style house with an immaculately kept garden, one James attended with quiet devotion. It had been their dream home, a place of sanctuary, and she had every intention of keeping it that way. Her promotion to chief had caught many by surprise, but not those who knew her best. Sarah had an unshakable reputation. She had led countless successful operations, held the department's highest case closure rate, and commanded the loyalty of her officers through a potent blend of tough love and unwavering support. But here in Oakwood Heights, she was just another resident, and she liked it that way. Her neighbors knew her not as Chief Martinez, but as a quiet widow who maintained a pristine lawn and helped Mrs. Peterson with her groceries every Sunday after church. To them, she was just another professional heading off early in her unmarked car, likely working some corporate job downtown. The only clue to her true profession? The perfectly maintained American flag waving proudly in front of her home, a tradition James had started and one she continued in his honor. For over a decade, the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association had been largely unremarkable, more concerned with organizing holiday potlucks than enforcing trivial rules. Under the leadership of retired schoolteacher Martha Williams, the HOA had fostered a sense of community rather than control. Disputes were settled over coffee and violations were rare, addressed with understanding rather than punishment. That all changed 3 weeks ago. Sarah had missed the election meeting, too busy overseeing what would become the city's largest drug bust in history. A 6-month operation had finally come to a successful close, and while she was coordinating the final details, ensuring every suspect was booked, every piece of evidence secured, her neighborhood's balance of power had shifted dramatically. The first indication of trouble came via email, an announcement about the formation of a community compliance task force. Sarah had glanced at it while waiting for paperwork to process, initially dismissing it as new board members flexing their minor authority. But something about the email's wording triggered her instincts, the same gut feeling she got when interrogating suspects. Someone was enjoying their newfound power a little too much. Within days, the friendly neighborhood bulletin board had turned into a digital wall of shame. Anonymous reports of violations flooded in, followed by passive-aggressive reminders about fines and compliance. Neighbors who once exchanged pleasantries over fence lines now hurried inside at the sight of one another, fearful of being reported for something as absurd as unauthorized social gatherings. Sarah had considered attending the next board meeting to assess the situation firsthand, but a series of high-profile cases kept her at the precinct late into the night. She had reasoned that the new board's enthusiasm for control would inevitably fizzle out. Surely, once they realized policing a neighborhood was more exhausting than they'd anticipated, they'd let it go. She couldn't have been more wrong. The moment she saw that neon orange violation notice taped to her door, she knew she had underestimated them. She had just finished debriefing her team on the drug bust success. 37 arrests, $2.3 million in seized assets, and not a single officer harmed. It should have been a night of triumph. Instead, she was greeted by a garish notice practically glowing against the wood of her front door. With the precision of an investigator handling evidence, she plucked it free, her sharp eyes scanning the document. Violation of Waste Bin Ordinance 23C. The bolded header blared. Below were grainy, ill-angled photos of her trash bins, positioned just enough to make it seem like they were visible from the street. The fine? $79. Due in 7 days, with threats of additional penalties for late payment. But what caught her train wasn't the fine itself. It was the unauthorized use of the city's official seal in the bottom corner of the document. Leaning against her doorframe, Sarah pulled out her phone, opening her home security app. James had insisted on installing the system years ago, joking that a cop's house should be the hardest to rob. Now, Those cameras would serve a new purpose. She scrolled through the footage, her frustration sharpening into focused determination. 6:45 a.m. Sarah, clearly visible, moving her bins behind the designated fence after collection. 2:30 p.m. A white SUV slowing as it passed her house, lingering near her driveway. 3:17 a.m. The previous night, the same SUV, this time with dimmed headlights, stopping briefly. A figure in what appeared to be a mock security uniform stepping out, shifting her bins slightly into view of the street, then snapping photos. "Got you," she muttered, her instincts clicking into place. She knew that SUV. It belonged to Gerald Thompson, the newly elected HOA president, who had taken to calling himself the Director of Community Standards Enforcement, a man who had spent 3 decades as a middle manager at a paper company before retiring, and apparently deciding to channel his frustrations into neighborhood tyranny. Sarah composed a firm yet professional email, attaching the security footage, and a pointed reminder about the legal implications of impersonating city officials. She'd dealt with power-hungry bureaucrats before. The best tactic? Hit them with facts, give them an out, and watch them back down. The response came within minutes. "Dear Resident Martinez, your attempt to contest this violation through unauthorized surveillance footage is itself a violation of HOA Code 47B. No security cameras shall be positioned in a manner that may capture public street views without express board approval. This secondary violation carries an additional $150 fine. Furthermore, your accusation regarding document authenticity has been noted as a hostile response to official HOA communication. The Community Compliance Task Force takes such allegations seriously. We will be conducting a full property inspection within the next 48 hours. Compliance is not optional. Regards, Gerald Thompson, Director of Community Standards Enforcement, Chairman, Community Compliance Task Force, President, Oakwood Heights HOA." Sarah read the email twice, her law enforcement instincts sounding alarms. The overuse of self-appointed titles, the escalating threats, the desperate need to assert control. This wasn't just a power trip. It was a calculated move to establish dominance over the entire neighborhood. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Mrs. Peterson. "Sarah, dear, you might want to know they just towed Miss Jenkins's car. Crack in her windshield. She's 82. She's crying on her porch. They're out of control." Sarah's grip tightened on her phone. She'd spent her career standing against bullies, whether they wore gang colors or 3-piece suits. And this wasn't going to end with an email. Gerald Thompson had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had started a fight with the wrong person.